Hey, everybody, welcome back. It is Steve Fretzin, and this is the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. We are here for helping you be that lawyer, confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. If you are hearing about Fretzin for the first time, we work with attorneys all over the world, helping them to dramatically grow their law practices. And business development's a great thing to focus on. As you know, lawyers don't learn that in law school or at the law firm level. And I spent all my time doing that. And then I get the pleasure of interviewing all these amazing folks from around the world that do technology and operations and finance and all the stuff that I don't want to do and have no interest in. And when you find someone absolutely special that really gets it, you want to bring them on the show. And Jay, I think this is your second time.
I think this would be number three.
Oh, number three.
Maybe
I don't
the
allow
second
that.
time
We're
was a
gonna have
very
to cut this.
forgettable episode.
Jay, we're gonna have to cut this short. I don't allow three timers. So, but thanks for stopping by. No, we're gonna have some fun with Jay today, guys. I had Jay speak at my peer advisory group, my Rainmaker Roundtable, and man, he just crushed it. There were lawyers asking all kinds of very technical questions and really interested in AI and efficiencies and automations, and Jay didn't miss a beat. And we're gonna see if he can double down on our podcast today. So let's start off with our quote of the show, Jay, and that is Archimedes, who said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum to place it on, and I shall move the world." Welcome to the show again, and tell us a little bit about why you love that quote.
Well, it's all about leverage. So, everything that I do on a day-to-day basis is about maximizing the amount of leverage that attorneys have at their disposal in order to perform useful tasks. So AI folds directly into that. I was so thrilled when 3 or 4 years ago, AI started to make a larger splash into the scene because it was finally ready to be used in a legal setting. You'll hear me speak all the time about people focus, especially attorneys, on the hallucination aspect of AI, but my belief is that it is absolutely good enough to serve a utility for the legal profession.
Yeah, I get a lot out of it because I think what we're saying in this and what he's saying in that quote is, let's figure out a solution. Let's figure out what is it going to take to make something move, and how do we do it? And we work backwards from there. Like, what do we want to accomplish? And then let's work back on how we have to do it. And that's a lot of legal tech, I think, right now, and a lot of AI. It's like we think it's about all these cool things we want to do, and then we back into like, how is this going to do it? But Jay, give us a little bit of background on yourself. Everybody, Jay McAllister, CEO of Paragon Tech. This is, you have one of the more interesting backgrounds and how you got into working with lawyers. I think, you rolled some dice or something.
Yeah, well, I've been a skeptic my entire life, and I always thought it was a negative trait. So as I started to kind of go through life, always as a kid, I would question everything. My father, he was actually a big reason why I think I do the work that I do, not because also works in technology, although he would like to believe so, but it was actually because of the fact that he fueled my curiosity by actually giving me adults' responses to adult questions that I would ask. Hey, Dad, why do we need to wear seatbelts in the car? This is like when I'm 6 years old, right? And he told me, well, back in the 60s and 70s, there were so many people who were ejected out of their vehicles, right? And you would think, well, you would tell a kid that? But it gave me such an understanding, a profound understanding of cause and effect. And he would continue to do that through my entire childhood. So, as I started to get a little bit older, I really started focusing on technology. It fascinated me. The fact that you could, again, talking about leverage, you could use technology to force multiply your efforts and do things that previously were not possible. Carried that with me all the way through my early adult years and decided to found my company, Paragon Tech, because I had a skill in technology and realized that it was actually monetizable. Businesses have problems that technology can solve for, and that's worth something. It's worth money. So it wasn't until, I kind of found my groove when I started working with my first legal client, because I realized for the first time in my life, I could take my skepticism and it perfectly mirrored how all of my clients thought already. They were skeptics about all the tools and the technology out there. And I'm someone who demands real solutions to real problems. So I was able to easily parlay why this is going to be beneficial, how we're going to do it, and how it's going to help you to be a more effective attorney. So that brings us to today, where now we're in our 12th year of business, and we're thriving. We're thriving, loving it. The legal community has embraced me. I know, as well with you, it's always interesting when you focus on working with lawyers and you're not a lawyer yourself. But I'm having a lot of fun.
Have you found yourself like more risk averse and more of a perfectionist because of it?
No,
That's
actually the
pretty,
opposite, I would say,
okay,
because
just
I'm aware
checking.
of it. And,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
like I'm aware of it, so I try to purposely create guardrails to keep me from spiraling down the endless pursuit that is perfectionism.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's just it's a lot of my father, the late great Larry the Fretzin, lawyer Larry the lawyer Fretzin, whatever. He he had all that perfectionism and risk aversion, and he also I also talk about a little bit about it's grew up in the project, so he had serious money issues, like just didn't have a pot to piss in. So every dollar he made was not a normal dollar. It was like a highly coveted dollar that he, I just, it's funny because my kid will ask me for money and I want him to earn it and I want him to, have that sense of it. I know you've got a young one at home, but it's like, it's hopefully not all of his bad money habits fall down on me and all that. But I think, he was perfect for the lawyer role because he was, devil's advocate for his clients and he was helping them avoid major issues because he would see them before they happened and all that. So let's talk a little bit about the sort of the history, if you will, of not just legal tech, but really leaning into AI and how it's shaping the legal profession and how lawyers are generating revenue and how they're going to, starting to leverage it in a proper way.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. There's so much in that. Before we get there, I just want to say, because of and I think this is important for context. I had the privilege of listening to your episode with your father, Larry,
Ah, number 200.
who number 200, which was such a heartwarming episode to hear the playful banter back and forth between you guys. Now, what I've realized actually is, when you talked about the risk aversion, and this parlays, trust me, it parlays into the technology and AI conversation. That's one trait that I possess that I believe is actually a direct contrast with most attorneys. I am extremely risk tolerant. I mean, you see the helmet. If people are watching on video, they could see various pieces of motorsports gear behind me. I'm a motorcycle racer and a car racer and an aviation enthusiast.
Well, you
So
pulled
these are
you
like
pulled up the first time I met you, and you were your young 20s, and you were in a Corvette. I was like, "What? What is going on with
right.
this kid?"
Well, that's a separate conversation on irresponsible financial habits. We can
Okay, all right,
maybe that'll
different.
be episode 4. We can define how I fell into that trap. But no, so when it comes to AI, a lot of attorneys I mentioned before, the primary concern is always tends to be around the accuracy of the information that's being output. I don't know if just hot off the press, if you've seen in Minnesota, there was an AI ethics professor, and that was asked to opine on a case. He's a Stanford professor who's asked to opine on a case in Minnesota. And it was all about Minnesota's law against deepfakes. So basically, how this goes is they were trying to pass some legislation that would strictly prohibit deepfakes, which is essentially creating AI originated video content that portrays someone doing something in not a positive light. So they were trying to pass some legislation that would ban deepfakes in the context of political elections, political campaigns. So so this individual agreed that that was the fact, or that these deepfakes should be banned, and he actually submitted a brief to the court. Problem is that he's an AI ethics professor at Stanford, and the brief that he sent in actually cited cases that did not exist.
Mm.
This was like, I mean, so the judge just remarked on this about 6 or 7 days ago, because once he was found out that his cases didn't exist, he admitted the fact that he actually didn't check the sources. And the judge came back and said, "Well, we're not going to allow you to amend your response. Your credibility with the court has been shattered," and specifically wrote in this memorandum that any lawyers who use AI need to check the output before submitting to this court, with exclamation points in this official document. So, it's very easy to think about the risks, but as the duty to competency goes, it explains that lawyers must be up to date on the risks, but also the benefits of relevant technology. And then it starts to be, these sort of things as they develop over time. We're in the nascent stages of AI, but it's already becoming so useful. And we can talk about some specific examples that my clients are using AI in. But, you just have to maintain a level of knowledge about these things. They're not going anywhere. This is definitely not something that is a fad. I think most people can see that. Every year, Clio releases a new legal trend study, and the report from this year showed that 73% of lawyers are using AI in some capacity, versus last year it was 20 something percent. So, they're seeing these major leaps between just one year.
I mean,
And
is AI, I mean, is there some confusion between AI and automation? Like there's automation that I'm using, but is that also AI or is that are they separate?
so you can go down the rabbit hole. So this is actually something, it's a scholarly debate that's going on hot right now, because there isn't actually even an agreed upon definition of what constitutes AI versus what is not AI. Typically, the way we think of AI is that in the legal technology space is that you're using computers to analyze information and come up with bespoke responses, original responses that did not exist before. So that's generative AI. That's typically what we think of when people use the term AI casually. But no, this report is specifically talking about AI use. Now, there isn't any specific data, and I actually followed up, and I was at ClioCon and talked to Joshua Lennon, who is the individual who assembles the report. And there isn't any data around the exact way and manner that attorneys are using AI. It was a survey that they about, I think, 20 or 30,000 individuals participated in that. But I would imagine, based on what I'm seeing with my clients, most of that is probably ChatGPT use, maybe not even necessarily for legal production related activities, but more
Right.
so, marketing copy and summarizing emails and those type of things. So yeah.
Yeah, got it, got it. Okay. So then we understand that it's happening. We understand it's in our face. What are the things that lawyers should be looking for in AI to help them with their law practice, to help them with marketing and growth and generating business too?
So my belief is that they should not be looking for AI to solve the problems that they have. Oftentimes, what I find is that when you look at the problem from that lens of we're looking to invest in an AI tool that can solve issues that we have, you wind up actually creating more problems than you had before. Now you have additional tools that your firm needs to be up to speed on using. They need to spend time training, and it may not necessarily solve a problem in a meaningful way for the firm. So ultimately, that tool becomes wasteful spend. I find a much more useful frame to look at the issue through is what are the actual business constraints that the firm is being hindered by. And this usually these constraints come up in your management meetings, or when you have your year-end retreat where the partners get away and talk about the firm's performance. What are you struggling with? Are you struggling with rising costs and diminished rising costs and diminished ability to bill hours that you previously billed before for activities that clients are pushing back on? I'll give you an example here. Having an insurance defense client where in Buffalo, New York, and they were having major pushback from the insurance carriers who have, of course, these massive troughs of data from law firms all across the country. And so because of they have the data, they were able to analyze, and you better believe they are doing this. They're able to say, hey, this particular task, it could be automatable via AI or maybe via traditional automations as you speak of them. And they're saying we're not going to pay out the same amount of hours that you say that it takes. So they're being pushed and challenged on their billing entry. So they have to figure out ways to be resourceful with the tools that they have. And obviously, in this particular case, we're talking about firms that are they can't necessarily dictate. It's not a free market, so to speak. What insurance carriers dictate the price that they can charge. So it's now starting to trickle out from that area into other practice areas of law, family law, even personal injury where it's contingency based. These folks are incentivized by being as resourceful and as efficient with their time as possible. So what I realized over time is that this is a fairly abstract way of thinking about solving for the issue. And oftentimes firms were struggling to actually identify what those business constraints are. So I created a framework that I call Leverage AI, which helps them to contextualize how to ultimately identify activities that would be suitable to be outsourced to AI.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And so then what are you seeing lawyers using it for right now? Like what the common lawyer that you're interacting with and engaging with on a daily basis, what are they actually doing with AI? And is it all ChatGPT or are there other things they're doing?
So it all starts with most lawyers. It's, they're using it to draft a grocery list for themselves, right? And I think this is a good thing. Like I say this sort of facetiously, but there's you're let's say you're someone who's trying to learn how to swim. There's so much information out there and YouTube videos and articles you can read, but ultimately the best way to learn how to swim is to actually jump in a pool and get wet. And maybe you start off on the shallow end so that you can get your bearings and kind of figure out, okay, this is how I float and this is how I measure my breathing and things like that. But ultimately, you need hands-on experience. So I think it's good that people are starting, that 76% of lawyers using AI. I think it's good that people are starting to interface with these tools just for their daily life. But when you want to kick things into high gear and use this for legal production, I always recommend, start off with every lawyer needs to be able to put information out there about themselves in a compelling way that ultimately convinces other people that they might be a good choice to hire. This is business development, right? So use ChatGPT to create some marketing copy. It's very low barrier to entry. You're not dealing with sensitive information. So the confidentiality component, which we can talk about that and how lawyers can secure their data when they're using AI tools for legal production. But those things don't typically come into play in those contexts. So that's what I typically see first, the marketing copy, creating social media posts. There's a methodology that I use for my social media content, which is you always want to have a very well organized framework for the idea that you want to communicate, because there's an almost unlimited amount of expressions that you can use to communicate the same idea. But ultimately, the AI just helps you to get to those expressions really quickly, but you need a great scaffolding in order to be able to construct that. So use that and then pick the best version and use that. Now you have your marble to carve. So that's way number one. Now, when we're talking about legal operations, typically the first thing I see is legal research. Why? Because it's fairly systematic, the way that attorneys perform legal research currently, and then the way that they can perform legal research with AI. So the current method with legal research is essentially you have the facts of your particular matter, and you perform a search based on keywords that you'd like to indicate to the legal research tool. Let's just say, LexisNexis, for example, and you'll submit those keywords and you'll go through all the cases and you'll keep searching for keywords until no new cases come up. Now, you can obviously imagine this is extremely time consuming, and we're really we're in the nascent stages of this starting to become of this way of performing legal research becoming not a best practice, because of the fact that you're spending so much time looking at the same cases over and over again, because you have to eliminate the outliers. Also, you're reading cases that have nothing to do with your matter, but in order to understand that, you have to go through and read those cases. So that's the old way. You essentially just brute force method where you exhaust all the options until nothing new arises. New way, you use an AI powered tool that understands the context of what you're looking for, based on the facts of the matter that you're working on, and then it will go out and it'll identify the best cases that are likely to be related to yours, have a similar fact pattern, and then you're only focusing on that subset of cases. Now, again, and I'll stress this again, with any AI tool in the current state of AI, these are all meant to be used for draft purposes. You would never want to submit something in its raw state from the AI tool, right? It's like giving it
Unless you're a Harvard professor or wherever that guy was from.
Stanford, right? I think
Stanford.
there's a Stanford exception to
Yeah,
that,
the
right?
Stanford exception. That's what we're
Yeah.
gonna coin it.
The Stanford except yeah, we had the Stanford prison experiment and now the Stanford
Exception.
exception. So you always, think of it as you're giving it to the brand new associate down the hallway who you've never worked with before. You would never just give them an assignment and then submit that directly to the court. So AI is the same way. You take those cases, you review them, and then you put together the fact pattern, use it to craft your argument, draft your brief, and then now you've sufficiently performed that activity. So those are some of the initial ways that I've seen it being used and that my clients are interfacing with it. There's some interesting methodologies when you get into ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT has gotten a really bad reputation for inaccuracy and hallucination. It's been mostly, if you look online, people mostly refer to ChatGPT as being used for entertainment purposes, but there's absolutely a a utility for it in a legal context, even for legal production workflows. Here's the thing. There's actually been some brand new studies out of this year, 2025, where they've done some double blind studies between humans and AI to see which ones hallucinate more. And many of those studies come back saying that humans hallucinate at a higher rate than AIs. It really depends on the context that you look at it from.
Because AI doesn't have mushrooms and we do.
Well, amongst other things, right? And that's the thing. It's like, it's what is your comparison medium? Because so for example, when electric vehicles first came out, they started introducing autonomous vehicles. Everyone wanted to poo-poo on those autonomous vehicles for getting into accidents. But when you look at your standard electric vehicle and you have it drive, I'm sorry, not standard electric vehicle, your standard autonomous vehicle, and you have it drive 1 million miles, you'll see that on average, they get into about one accident per million miles. Now, give me any human, the best driver that you know, and have them drive 1 million miles and tell me how many accidents they get into. So it's like, it's not a zero-sum game. People like to focus on it's drastically overstated, the hallucination amount. That's why I say it's absolutely AI is in a state where it is absolutely good enough to serve utility as long as you have the proper oversight and supervise it.
I mean, people feel more safe driving than they do even in an airplane because they feel like they have control. And it's giving up that control with autonomous vehicles. That's the fear that people have, even though it may recognize not only its driving, but other people's driving poorly and potential accidents that it can avoid and things like that. And there's no distraction that, we would have because we're looking at our phones or we're eating a donut or whatever the hell we're doing. But I haven't really observed I've only, seen on TV like what the hallucinations and the inaccuracies could be. But I think we have to continue to go with like trust but verify, right? You just can't, if I get a LinkedIn post and I put it through ChatGPT but I'm never gonna do it blindly. Just say, oh, well, whatever it was, I'll just put it up. I think there has to still be a set of eyes on it, human eyes, before you put something out, whether it's legal or whether it's marketing or whether it's whatever.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, this is just an age-old pattern repeating itself. So what we're witnessing is the Gartner's hype cycle, which basically goes like this. There's usually a catalyst event, a new technology. So ChatGPT, let's call it that, which by the way, ChatGPT wasn't the first available AI. It was actually a tool called GitHub Copilot, which was for programmers and coders, which is why most people know ChatGPT. Another fun fact, specifically since we're talking to lawyers, many people are familiar with the tool Spellbook, which is a contract drafting and review AI tool. Spellbook actually preceded ChatGPT. Most people don't know that. They think it came afterward. So here's the interesting thing, though. The way the Gartner's hype cycle works, you have this catalyst event, ChatGPT is released. Everybody gets excited about the potential realities that could, the way it could revolutionize the way we work. They jump on board. And then you reach what's called peak optimism, right? So everyone's really happy about it, excited. Then you start to see the trend change. People find out, oh, these AI tools can hallucinate. Oh, people are getting in trouble. Lawyers are getting sanctioned from using AI without checking it, right? And then you get into what's called the trough of disillusionment. So this is where I think we're at now, where people are starting to take a step back and we're looking at, okay, how do we? There's ethics committees being put together on how to use AI, and people are sort of taking a step back. Well, then you get to informed optimism on the other side of the trough of disillusionment, where now people understand fully the risks and the benefits. And then after that, typically you get to where you're in the productivity era. You don't have as much hype surrounding it, but now you're actually using the tool in meaningful ways. And technology has evolved to the point where it now is able to be employed in a way that actually creates measurable results.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really interesting sort of life cycle of how we think about AI. So let's wrap up with what you see as the up and coming technologies that are going to be useful to attorneys. Like, what do you think is the next, the 2.0 of this that's going to come out and help them? It's may eliminate some jobs, but it also might help lawyers get super focused on, the brain work and the heavy lifting versus the minutia work.
Right. Every time I present at a new firm, there's typically rumblings within the support staff or, the first year associates, and you hear like, well, this seems to be able to take over a lot of the things that I'm doing already. And, my belief on this is, when has this ever been a bad thing? Ever? Like, we used to have switch operators on our phone networks, right? And this is just, I hear,
This
this
is
is
this is
before my
this
era.
is these
So
are rumors.
this is all hearsay. Yeah.
There used to be
All hearsay.
horses that got
Right.
taken out by tractors, right? At some point.
Yeah. So, that there were jobs that were lost, but ultimately, I don't think of it as a job that was lost. These jobs were transitioned to perform more useful activities. Like, you don't need someone to just assemble a list of all the cases that you need to look at so that the attorney can then go and review it. Like, I would argue that you're paying that person a salary. It's money much better spent having them perform an activity that's actually going to move the firm forward in a measurable way. So as far as what's next, we're already in the phase of what's next. You've probably heard of agentic AI. It's the next evolution of generative AI. So right now, the standard AI large language models we use, essentially you prompt it and they give you a response. They're getting a lot better. ChatGPT just released their O1 model, which has advanced reasoning capabilities, basically meaning instead of just blurting out the first response, the first thing that it comes up as a response, it will actually analyze what you're asking, think about it, and determine if there is even an appropriate response to your prompt and give you a much better result. But that's still this, it's this I ask, you answer. Agentic AI, what this does is it will actually, you train it on a series of tasks that you want it to complete, and it will actually go through and determine what prompts need to be
Mm.
asked. It will ask itself those prompts, and then it will generate the output. So, for example, if I need to, uh, draft a motion for summary judgment, how do I know, like, what are the triggers that allow me to understand that I need to draft that motion? Well, the AI, you program that in so it's able to go in and understand that, okay, when a certain milestone has been met in the case, I need to draft a motion for summary judgment. Okay, what are the facts of the case? Okay, and it'll ask itself, okay, what are the facts? And it'll use that to incorporate into that motion, and it'll actually draft the motion, and then it'll trigger an email to be sent to you to say, okay, here's the completed motion. What do you think of it? And then you ultimately would send it off, right? And there's multiple ways you can configure it, but the main idea there is that it's not just question and answer, it's performing activities uh, based on specified constraints that you give it.
I mean, I love that, and that's super interesting. As you're talking though, my head is swimming with one other thought is that, Google and the way that we use search and the way that law firms, pay per click or SEO or whatever, social media marketing, that's going to end up being somewhat eliminated, where instead of, paying $200 per lead or per click or whatever, that, I'm going to ask, I'm looking for a personal injury attorney in Chicago, and it's going to give me the result that's best for me. Maybe it's based on my personality. Maybe it's based on my injury. Maybe it's based on all the data of who has handled the most cases in this area for that type of injury. I don't know, but I don't think it's going to give me a list of, 2, 3 pages of results. I think it's going to be hyper focused on, one result, and who's going to get that one result. Is it the one who has the most content? Is it the one that's, that's paid the most in the past? Probably not. So I think there are also firms that are leaning on certain types of marketing, and that's where all their business comes from. And I think they're in for a rude awakening if they don't look at maybe diversifying over the next number of years how they bring in business. That's just a thought from the marketing business development side of things.
And it's totally possible right now. The technology is already exist for it to do exactly what you described. Now, what you'll notice is that in most of these large language models, if you prompt it with a question like that, it actually will not, the goal is for it to remain unbiased. And there's a whole debate about whether it is or not, because inherently it's trained by humans, and do their subconscious biases get programmed into the tool? That's an entirely different debate. But the goal is to be unbiased. So if you ask it, who's the best business development professional for attorneys? It's not going to say, oh, you should call Steve Fretzin. It's going to tell you, I cannot actually provide you information that would promote one vendor over another. However, here are the criteria that you should use to rank and think about those. So there are that's more of an ethics question, and those safeguards are already built in, but it's not necessarily a conversation of whether the technology can do it, because it absolutely could do it. Um, this all spun off from this exercise. It's interesting if anybody listening wants to try it. You can actually ask ChatGPT to rank your business. Like you can ask it to, I think I saw it on LinkedIn. It was like, give me an honest critique on my business. And you give it your URL, it'll go through your website, go through your content, and it'll tell you what it believes you do and give you a critique about where you fall within the marketplace.
Mm,
That's where I realized that it won't actually recommend one vendor came from.
interesting and scary. Listen, Jay, we've got to
You can
wrap
also
up.
ask it to roast you, just so you know. You
Oh,
give it your LinkedIn profile and just ask it to roast you. It will
again,
do a great job.
I have a teenager. It's unnecessary. I'm getting roasted nightly. And if you guys know my personality, you know you mess with the bull, you get the horns. That's been the motto since he was a kid. So he's dealing with that. Hey man, I love your game-changing book and podcast suggestion. It's been brought up on the show before, and every time it does, I beam with excitement because Alex Hermosi you look at his background in working with gyms and things like that, and you go, what the hell does this guy who works with gyms know? Man, this guy's brilliant, and I love his book, 100M Offers.
Yep.
And Alex Hermosi, everybody. So let's keep this pretty brief, but why do you love Alex?
Alex redefined the way that I think about business and value creation. I use that with my clients on a daily basis. So ultimately, there's this thing. Theodore Levitt, he was a Harvard economist back in the 60s. He wrote that business transactions don't happen until your client believes that they're getting more value than they're getting in exchange. So
Hmm.
basically, the money that they're giving you. Most people think of business as when they think about the value that they create, one, it's this abstract concept that they can't actually define. Alex defined it. He created the value equation, which essentially gives you a framework for understanding how much tangible value you create with your services for your client. But then the second thing is that people always think that their services should be directly proportional. The fee that they charge for their services should be proportional to the value that they offer. And that's where people get it wrong. And I learned that, in just my research, but Alex reinforced the idea of that you really need to make sure there's a disproportionate amount of value perceived from your client. And only when you reach that status are you able to charge fees that are profitable and also above what the marketplace typically allows for.
Yeah. Really fantastic. I can't recommend that book enough. It's comes in a workbook form, so you can really write on it. And then his podcast, The Game, and I think he on the podcast actually does the audio versions of his books. So if you want to pick up either listen to the podcast or pick up the book, I like the manual book because I think writing in there and putting down in a workbook what you want to do or questions you have or things that you want to highlight. That's always a good way to do it. Awesome. Let's wrap up with our sponsors. We've got PIMCon coming up, everybody, in October. You can go from good to goat with PIMCon and our friends over at Rankings.io. And of course, check out Law Her Podcast if you're looking for a great podcast to accompany the Be That Lawyer podcast. Especially if you're a woman who's really looking to take things to the next level in your career, Law Her is the way to go. My friend Sonia over there crushing it. Jay, man, you've been fantastic. I so appreciate you coming on the show a third time and give us your digits. People want to get in touch with you. They want to work with you, talk with you, learn from you. How do they do that?
Absolutely. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. So we'll drop the LinkedIn URL. Just search for Jay McAllister. I'm constantly putting out really thought-provoking, at least what I think is thought-provoking content. Steve, what do you think? Is any of it thought-provoking, or should I
It's all thought provoking. I mean,
abandon
everything
ship?
you say is thought provoking. I was just sitting there in shock as you were talking to my peer advisory group, and I just every word out of your mouth, I was like, "Damn, this guy's smart and he knows what he's talking about."
Yeah, so this is all just it's sort of a stream of consciousness. It's my learnings as I work with various law firms and see what works and what doesn't, and I share those findings with my LinkedIn audience. So there, and also YouTube at Paragon Tech, where I have entire tutorials on using AI with law firm context, building out custom GPTs, evaluating your fee structure in this AI powered world. I have, 1 hour long tutorials on there for things like that. So those are the main places to reach me. If you want to call, 815-582-9799 is my phone number.
Yeah. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. Jay, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your wisdom and, really talking up AI. I mean, it's a topic I don't think many people are bored with yet. But it's always evolving, which I think keeps it interesting.
Well, can I offer one more thing that's going to be mind blowing to everyone listening?
Okay. Yeah. Throw it in.
Okay. So if you haven't had a chance yet to, this sort of was released without a lot of fanfare, and it sort of was like no one really realized it's here. ChatGPT over the holiday season, there were 12 days of AI campaign. They released the advanced voice mode, which allows you to interact with ChatGPT in near real time. You can have conversations with it. So instead of prompting it and typing in your prompts, you talk with it, and it gives you really insightful feedback. Now, you can take that and put it on steroids, because actually what it allows you to do is you can actually give it access to your camera, and you can ask questions based on things that are in your environment. So if you're working on your car, for example, and there's a part that's broken, you can point your camera there and say, what's the issue here? And what are the repair steps? And it's very good. I actually built for the people watching on video, I just did a tutorial. This will be on YouTube in a couple days. I did a tutorial from a personal injury context where this is a sketch that a fictitious client would have given you about a car accident they were involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And I show how to use ChatGPT's advanced video mode to analyze that car wreck and put together the initial statement of facts for the attorney, just so they can start working on the case. So
wow, really slick.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, awesome, man. I appreciate that. Guys, everybody check out Jay online and see what he's up to. But thank you, Jay, and thank you, everybody, for spending time on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. We are here to help you be that lawyer. Confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. Take care, be safe, be well. We'll talk again soon.